Good evening once again. I'm Sam Arano, and slightly more on time this year, I can present the results of the 2024 viewer survey. For those of you who missed it, every May I hold a survey to learn more about my fans. This information helps inform my creative and business decisions, though I stress that it doesn't dictate them. And while releasing some of the data I collect might unfairly influence future surveys or create some other perverse incentives, I think most of it's safe to share, and that those of you who are bothered enough to watch this video will find it pretty interesting as well. First of all, this survey received 2,874 responses, which is actually only about a 9% increase over 2023. This is surprising because overall subscribers grew by 31%. But you win some, you lose some. Assuming that everyone who took this survey was subscribed by the end of May, that would mean that it was taken by 4.7% of subscribers. Starting with age, 2000 remains the peak year, which it also was last year. I don't quite know what to think about that. For country of residence, very little change from last year. However, if you responded from one of the top 6 countries on this list, you will have received 2 additional questions that other people didn't. The first was for your state or province, so let's get into that. I don't have much to say about the US results that I didn't say last year. It looks like a blend of large overall population and large Jewish population. And the same can be said for Israel as well. The north of Israel has a larger population than the south, but Jews are a much narrower majority of the population there. And while most of my audience isn't Jewish, there are a lot of people in the north of Israel who only speak Arabic and Hebrew, so there's a definite language barrier. The UK results are pretty different at a glance, but that's mainly a result of the sample size being much smaller. Though I did have to make a correction to some of the data. See, there were 6 respondents from the counties of Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire that erroneously reported themselves as living in the statistical region of Southeast England, when in fact those counties are part of the East of England, the East of England being the region of East Anglia, plus Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, and I accounted for that error in these stats. For Canada, I received responses from every province and territory except for New Brunswick and Nunavut, which I think is quite impressive. However, I was very surprised to see that British Columbia outnumbered Quebec, because within Canada, Jews are stereotyped as being from Quebec in the same way that American Jews are stereotyped as being from New York. Now, unlike New York, Quebec no longer has the largest Jewish population, Ontario does, but it's still higher than British Columbia. And I don't think the language difference accounts for it, because although most Jews in Quebec do speak French as their first language, I don't think it's a stretch to say that virtually all of them also speak English. And now the new places. First up, Germany. Again, overall population plus Jewish population. But Australia was interesting because Victoria outperformed New South Wales. Now, Victoria has a smaller population than New South Wales, but almost all of Australia's Jewish population is in Sydney and Melbourne, which are about equal in Jewish population. So this intrigues me. Now, if you responded from one of those 6 countries, I also asked for part or all of your postal or zip code. Whether it was all or part of the code depended on whether the full code covered a large or small area, so my data couldn't be used to dox you if it was stolen. Now, for privacy reasons, a lot of you declined, which is fine, and I understand that. However, we can now look, in the great Sam Arano statistical tradition, at my top cities. And here's the one everyone loves, first language. Again, not a huge change, and that's something we're going to see more of. I really have nothing to say here. For gender and sexuality, again there was some change in percentage from last year, but not a significant amount. Though I'll note that this was the first year in which cis women outnumbered trans women. Women overall increased quite a bit, though it's still a pretty small share, and there's no real news on sexuality. In education, the share of respondents with at least a bachelor's degree increased slightly. I don't know whether that's because my audience is getting older or because the kind of work I do is getting more attention in academic circles. At the same time, however, the share of current or former military personnel has slightly decreased. So with religion, the share of each of the major religions decreased, while the share of others and nones increased. However, I'm now convinced that the religion question in this survey is completely broken, and I need to find a new way to phrase and analyze it, so look forward to that next year. With Judaism, we don't see much of a change, same with Christian denomination, but again, I'm unhappy with the methodology of this question, so take it with a grain of salt. On this last question, the share of non-Jews with no personal experience with Judaism went down, while every other type of familiarity went up. I have no idea what to make of that. In politics, the bell curve of ideology that we saw smoothing out last year has started getting weird again. As for the mock election, using Israeli electoral rules, the outcome is almost the same as last year, barring the changes in the parties themselves, but however small it may be, there's a very consistent leftward shift here. However, since I released this survey, Labor and Meretz united to form the Israeli Democrats under former General Yair Golan, and as a result, this is what the results of the survey would look like now. With Where Did You Find Me? A pretty normal response. Keep in mind this survey opened in May, so whichever year the survey is held will have an unusually low number. Maybe not this low, but pretty low. And finally, the baseball question. This is something I asked just for fun and maybe to have a teachable moment, and this was kind of both. To those who responded to this question and were neither American nor Canadian, words cannot express my shame and disappointment that the Yankees came in first place. When I lived in Israel, I saw a lot of people wearing Yankees caps, which to me was just the ultimate expression of try-hard ignorance about American culture. First of all, no, that isn't just the generic logo of New York. Second, best case scenario, people in the US will assume you're a Yankees fan. Best case scenario. Which there's no sport in anyway, because the Yankees win more World Series than anyone, so unless you're born into that fandom, you just come off as a dick. Worst case scenario, people will assume you're an undercover cop. Something to think about for the future. If you were looking for a team to become a fan of, I would suggest literally any other. Except for the Astros because of the cheating. And the Red Sox, which have kind of become played out as the de facto anti-Yankees team, because really it's everyone versus the Yankees, and that isn't even the oldest rivalry in Major League Baseball. In fact, I'd encourage you, much like in my videos about American Jewish history, to look beyond the East Coast in general. So that's 2024. I'll see you with a new and hopefully improved survey in 2025.